Last week, the Daily Telegraph misrepresented Bill Shorten's mother's story in a front-page article. The Murdoch newspapers have an agenda to perpetuate a conservative point of view, which is also, for example, anti-climate change. If Labour comes into power, how would it handle a hostile press intent on undermining its policy?
Tanya Plibersek, we'll start with you.
Look, I think there's a couple of issues there. I think what happened with that story with Bill's mum last week was pretty awful, and I think Bill dealt with that well, and I don't really want to go back there. The issue of the role that News Corp have played in this election, the very clear line that they're taking in this election, well, that's kind of no surprise either. I mean, this is a company that paid no company tax between 2013 and 2017. They don't want a government that's going to close down tax loopholes that multinationals make use of. It's pretty clear that Rupert Murdoch would like a say in the election from New York, but I don't think the vast majority of Australians would. I think everybody values their vote. They'll make their own mind up. I don't think they'll be dictated to.
Just a quick question on that. Do you think this election is going to be a test of whether Rupert Murdoch still wields the kind of political power that he once did in the days of digital media? Is his power waning?
I think it's more a test of whether negativity and scare campaigns can win out over a bold and positive agenda. We've been, for years now, laying out our plans in detail. People can make their judgments about whether they think it's more important to protect tax loopholes for multinationals and millionaires, or whether they think it's more important to invest in hospitals and schools. That's what this comes down to.
Let's hear from Helen.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think from a rural and regional perspective, we actually have a different landscape when it comes to the press. We have lots of small newspapers, family owned and locally run. And indeed, those local newspapers would, at their peril, trash talk local candidates for an election campaign, because those local candidates are well known in the community. So I think it's a great strength that we still have those family-run newspapers. And this notion of lack of diversity in the press is a really important one nationally. I think Australians want to know that they have clear, transparent press, and when they see one newspaper barracking for one side, then they lose trust, and that's not a good thing. I guess the other thing I would say is that in supporting the small newspapers, the Wangaratta Chronicle, the Yea Chronicle, the Benalla Ensign, all of those marvellous Northeast Victorian newspapers, I thank them and I hope that they survive. And I also make the point that we also have local regional television, which tells our stories and reports the local issues. You don't hear much about the regional seats in the national press.
Simon Birmingham, did the Daily Telegraph do a lot of damage to your campaign at a critical moment with their own goal on Bill Shorten's mother?
Political commentators can talk about the political impact. I think the story should not have been written, should not have been published. And I think, as Tanya said, it's been dealt with. Bill dealt with it. Scott dealt with it. I think in terms of media commentary and the way the media runs, Australians in a country with a free media are free to choose not to read a newspaper that they think is biased, just as they're free to choose not to watch a television program that they think is biased, and they're free to go and get their media from whatever source they choose. I worry a little bit that I think too many people are drawing back into only getting their media and information from sources that they agree with a lot of the time, rather than actually letting it be tested elsewhere. But this election is not about the media in Australia. This election is about competing policies, and Tanya claimed a bold and positive vision for Australia. We think that it's expensive and risky, and the $387 billion of additional taxes the Labor Party is claiming.
Okay,
Tanya mentioned multinationals.
You'll get a chance to sum up in a minute, which
make the point very quickly
right now.
That on multinationals, 2% of Labor's $387 billion comes from multinationals.
Okay, so the question was on the media. I'm going to move to Richard Di Natale. Quick answer.
Look, News Corp is a malignant influence on our democracy. They're not News Corp, they're not a media outlet. They're the propaganda arm of the hard right of the Liberal Party, and they're becoming increasingly hysterical. They incubate hate. The question really is, what do we do about it? And what we need to do is we need to make sure we've got one of the most concentrated media markets in the world. Simon, people don't have a choice in many places because all they get is a News Corp paper. So we've got to have a public interest test when it comes to media mergers. It's one of the things we're putting forward. We've got to strengthen the powers of ACMA, the regulator, to hold these voices to account. And I'll tell you, a bulwark against News Corp is a well-funded ABC. The ABC and SBS, which is why we've committed 5 years of funding, but not just 5 years of funding, and we welcome the commitment from the Labor Party, but locked into legislation so that a future government can't get their hands on it because they don't like having a strong public broadcaster.
Okay, we've got time.